For language arts today, we are going to finish the story that we started on Monday, The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. So if you don't already have your Journeys book, please grab it out. We are going to start on page 430, which was the last page we read on Monday, but we're going to reread it just to help us get back into the story. So pull that out. We're going to do the same thing where I will read and I will stop at certain words and you fill those words in just so that you can keep engaged with me and read along with me, okay? So if you need to stop the video at any point to get your book or get ready, you of course can. We're going to get started, page 430 at the top. The amazing news spread about the gigantic lizard and the dog and the little girl who had found it. I'm going to pause us here just to review. Do you remember the name of our dog? If you do, say it out loud. Do you remember the name of the little girl who had found it? If you said Trey and Mary, you are correct. All right, let's go back to our reading. Soon, many strangers came to Lyme Regis where Mary and lived. They all wanted to hunt for 2. The men wore tall top hats. The women wore frilly bonnets. They carried umbrellas called parasols. And we can see that in the illustration below. They're carrying those pretty umbrellas named parasols. Mary shook her head and she rubbed Trey's soft ears. They watched together. They don't have the right tools, Mary whispered. They are wearing the wrong kinds of, aren't they? Trey yipped and chased his. And yesterday we talked about why she thought they were silly. Maybe it's because they had never done this before, so they didn't really know how to dress for this. So they're maybe dressed a little fancier. They're wearing frilly clothes. They're carrying pretty umbrellas called parasols, and they're wearing top hats. We know those are fancier clothes, so they might not be dressed the best for this activity. Curious scientists visited Lyme Regis too. One man came from the university in Oxford. His name was William Buckland. He went to the old carpenter's where Mary and Trey sold their. Can you show me where your ichthyosaur, young lady? He asked politely. Do you think you can find the spot again? Trey can find it, Mary boasted. If we look here, that word is exact. That is a vocabulary word. It's highlighted. Can you figure out what exact means based on the sentence around the word? Do you think you can find the exact spot again? If they're wanting to find it again, that means they're returning to a spot they've already been to. So exact means a specific spot. In this case, it's a spot where Mary has already been. And then she responds that Trey can find it. Before we read on, I want you to take a guess. This man is the man they were talking about. He was a scientist. We learned from our text. He came from the university in Oxford. That is a college. A university is a college. And yesterday, the picture that I used in our seesaw math lesson for partitioning, that was a picture of Oxford. Let me see if I can grab it for you. I got to go there when I was in college. So a man came from this university to check out the dinosaur or the fossils that Mary found because he was really interested. All right, let's keep reading. Together, Mary and Mr. Buckland followed the little dog across the beach and up to the. Trey sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the. Scratch, scratch. Suddenly, he yipped. Then he sat down. Mary pointed. It was the exact where she had discovered the strange fish. What an intelligent dog, Mr. Buckle declared. Trey wagged his tail. What does that usually mean when a dog wags his tail? A lot of you have dogs. You probably know it means they're happy or excited. And why do you think he would be excited in this moment? Take a guess and tell someone you're reading with or say it out loud. Why would Trey wag his tail and be excited? All right, we're going to move on to our next page. We don't have that many pages left. We're getting close to the end. Trey and Mary continued to dig for. They were very careful. Mary watched for rocks like her dad told her. Trey looked out for storms and high tides. Then one day another giant creature. Look, Trey, Mary cried. Is it a sea I want to pause our story and ask you something. Why do you think they were watching for falling rocks, and why was Trey looking out for storms and high tides? Why would they need to do that? Well, our text tells us they were very careful. We know this was part of being careful, looking for falling rocks and looking for storms and high tides. High tides are waves that come on the land. That was part of being careful, and they wanted to be careful because they're doing work that requires them to be careful. They're digging in the mountains. They don't want a storm to come and mess up what they're working on. They don't want to get caught or fall down, right? They don't want to get caught in falling rocks. So this is a job where they have to be careful. Trey sniffed the skeleton and snapped at it with his. The creature had a long, its backbone was like a humped turtle shell. Instead of and legs, it had 4 large paddles, but it wasn't a sea dragon. Mr. Buckland called it a plesiosaur. And you see, it took me a couple times to pronounce it, but that's okay. When we have new words, sometimes it takes a little while. Here, it breaks it down how I say it. So this says plesiosaur. Plesiosaur. Now you try it all by yourself. Awesome. One day, Trey and Mary found a fossil that no one in England had ever found. This one had huge bony, like a bat, and a long, sharp jaw. What did we just learn about Trey and Mary in our text? What did we just learn about what they discovered? If I look back, it says they found a fossil that no one in England had ever found before. That means they were the first people to ever find this fossil. Now, I want us to look at this because usually we know when we're reading text, the picture goes along with it. In this case, when I'm looking at this, does this look like a drawing like the rest of our text, or does it look like a real picture? If you said real picture, I agree with you. I think this is a real photograph, a real picture someone took compared to the drawings that we have had in our book so far. The reason they put a real picture in our book is to show us this was a real event, right? We're learning about a real person's life, a real true story. So this picture shows us what the real thing was that they found, right? They're talking about the thing they found that has bony wings and a long, sharp jaw. All right, we're back reading right here. Trey growled. "It looks like a gigantic lizard," Mary declared. The scientists thought so too, and that's why they named it pterodactyl. You probably heard this before, pterodactyl. That means lizard with wings. What does pterodactyl mean? What does it tell us in our text that pterodactyl means? It literally says pterodactyl. That means lizard with wings, and that's why they named it that. Over the years, Trey, Mary, and Mr. Buckland became good friends. They showed where to find the best in Lyme Regis. Mr. Buckland brought about dinosaurs for Mary. He brought beef for Trey. Mary, with Trey on her lap, studied her books every day. When Trey's turned gray and Mary was all grown up, they still collected fossils and sold them in the old shop. There were boxes and baskets filled with on the floor and on the shelves. Some of the fossil creatures were so they couldn't fit through the. Sometimes children and tourists stopped in to buy fossils of ancient sand dollars or tiny and curly. Many scientists came to the shop to buy fossils too. They brought carts and wagons to haul away the large ones. So what did we learn about Mary on this page? Does it tell us that she grew up and she got married? Does it tell us that she grew up and kept looking for fossils? Does it tell us that she grew up and got another dog? What does it tell us? Try telling someone out loud. If you said it tells us about what happened when Mary grew up and what she did for her job, you're correct. It tells us when Trey's whisker turned gray and Mary was all grown up, they still collected fossils and sold them in the old carpenter's shop. So it tells us that she continued to do the same thing that she loved to do as a little girl. Trey and Mary Anning became very... Today, if you go to the Natural History Museum in London, which is in England, you can see the fossils they discovered together. You can also see a famous of Mary holding her fossil basket and Trey, the dog that dug for... So when we go to the picture on this page, this one is a painting, but I can tell that this is a photo of a painting, and my text tells me as well. You can also see a famous painting of Mary holding her fossil basket and Trey, the dog that dug for dinosaurs. So I know that this picture is real, just like this picture is real. It's showing me something real versus the drawings, as lovely as they are not real. They're not real pictures of Mary and the other characters in our story. They don't exist outside the book, whereas this picture is a painting, but this is real and it exists in a museum. If you ever go to a museum and look at artwork, you would find this there. So that's the end of our story today. Remember, when we were reading through our story, we were thinking about all the things that happened in a person's life, a biography, and we were thinking about the events of what happened in her life in order. So it started out in our story when Mary was very young. It started out telling us a long, long time ago, there was a little dog named Trey. So it tells us about the story when Trey is little. And it starts out by telling us that Mary was 12 years old. Then it continues on and tells us as she grew up what she did in her life. It tells us her life events in order. Because remember, a biography tells about a person's events in their life in the order that they happened. And we can remember them by flipping through our story and reading the text and looking at the pictures. Then we learned as she got older, she kept collecting fossils and selling them in her store in the old carpenter shop. And then it ends with this picture they have of her in London. So what you are going to do is, there is a flip grid that you are going to go on to. It's in the lesson plan and on Google Classroom. And you are going to retell this story that we read, The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. You are going to retell it in order, telling about Mary Anning's life. And you are going to use sequencing words that we use, like first, next, then, finally, last. You get to choose the words you use, but you are going to retell this story. You're going to be retelling this story in order using those words on that flip grid.